Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
There are two types of people in this world: those who heed warnings written in ancient languages, and those who see "do not touch" as an invitation. Greg was proudly, stubbornly, the latter, which is why he found himself standing in his Aunt Mabel's attic, poking at a dusty, gold-rimmed compact with a mirror inside. Probably just another weird knickknack, Greg muttered to himself, blowing dust off the ornate surface. The compact gleamed despite years of neglect, its golden filigree catching what little light filtered through the grimy attic window. Aunt Mabel and her bizarre collecting habits. He turned the compact over in his hands, his fingers tracing the intricate patterns etched into the metal. The inscription on the lid read, in ornate script, "For a new perspective, look within." A new perspective? Greg snorted, examining his reflection in the tarnished metal. The only perspective I need is how to convince Aunt Mabel to let me store my motorcycle in her garage. He ran a hand through his short, disheveled hair, noting the 5 o'clock shadow that perpetually graced his square jaw regardless of how recently he'd shaved. Greg, who had never once used a compact or had a new perspective, flipped it open with a shrug. What's the worst that could happen? The universe, as it often does to those who ask such questions, immediately answered. A cloud of glittery smoke puffed into his face, smelling like roses, cookies, and a hint of impending doom. The pink and gold particles sparkled in the dusty air, swirling around him like a miniature galaxy. He coughed, waving frantically at the glitter cloud. Is this some kind of ancient makeup? Bath bomb explosion? The particles clung to his skin, seeming to sink into his pores as he blinked rapidly, the world shimmering around the edges like someone had run the attic through a beauty filter. Great, now I'm going to sneeze glitter for a week, he muttered, checking the mirror and froze. His reflection was blurring at the edges, like a photo being edited in real time. Whoa, this is some quality hallucination, Greg whispered, touching his face cautiously. Did Aunt Mabel store LSD in her makeup? His stubble faded beneath his fingertips, the rough texture melting away to reveal skin as smooth as polished marble. His cheeks, once angular and defined, softened and filled out, gaining a subtle, natural blush. Greg watched, transfixed with horror and fascination, as his jawline, once sharp enough to cut glass, melted into gentle curves that would make Renaissance painters weep. This isn't happening, he whispered, but the reflection told a different story. His nose, formerly a strong, somewhat crooked feature, thanks to a college rugby incident, shrank and reshaped into a pert button shape that would have been at home on a porcelain doll. The bones seemed to be rearranging themselves beneath his skin, painlessly but undeniably. He watched wide-eyed as his eyes themselves began to change. They grew larger, the sockets reshaping to accommodate the new dimensions. His lashes, once short and nearly invisible, lengthened dramatically, curling upward like delicate fans. The most startling change came when his irises, previously a mundane brown, swirled with new pigment, taking on a vivid shade of green he'd never seen outside of cartoon princesses or particularly aggressive marketing for mint gum. This can't be real, Greg murmured, his voice already beginning to change, higher and softer around the edges. This is some weird dream from eating Aunt Mabel's experimental lasagna last night. He reached up, intending to rub his eyes, and gasped. His hands were shrinking before his very eyes, fingers growing slender and elegant where they had once been thick and calloused. His palms narrowed, wrists becoming delicate, and his nails, bitten short for as long as he could remember, lengthened into neat, glossy ovals that looked professionally manicured. Okay, that's not supposed to woe. His voice cracked mid-sentence, like a teenager going through reverse puberty, then shot up an octave. The new voice that emerged from his throat landed somewhere between sultry jazz singer and customer service representative who actually sounds happy to help you reset your password at 3 a.m. Is this thing recording? She asked the empty attic, the new voice resonating with a melodic quality that sent shivers down his own spine. Because this would get 1 billion views online. The changes rolled on, unstoppable as a freight train with cut brakes. His neck thinned, the prominent Adam's apple that had bobbed when he swallowed beer melting away like ice cream on a hot sidewalk. His shoulders, once broad enough to block doorways, narrowed and slimped, creating a more graceful silhouette. Collarbones popped into elegant relief beneath skin that was rapidly losing its roughness and gaining a pearlescent quality. Greg felt a strange tingling sensation spread across his chest, followed by a warmth that radiated outward. He looked down in a mixture of terror and awe as his pectoral muscles, the result of countless mediocre gym sessions, softened, then swelled, then bloomed outward in a fashion both miraculous and deeply unfair. His plain gray t-shirt, once loose and comfortable, suddenly clung in all the wrong or right places. Holy, Greg gasped as two perfect, gravity-defying mounds pushed his shirt out, stretching the fabric to its limits. Well, I'd be popular at every high school in America, he muttered, then blushed deeply at his own reflection, the color spreading across cheeks that now had actual cheekbones. Are these real? He wondered aloud, cautiously bringing hands up to cup the new additions. The sensation was bizarre. They were clearly attached to him. He could feel his own touch, but they absolutely shouldn't be there. They feel real, too real, very, very real. He quickly dropped his hands, embarrassed despite being alone. The transformation continued its relentless march. Greg felt a peculiar squeezing sensation around his middle, as if invisible hands were molding him like clay. His sides drew in dramatically, waist-pinching, to create an hourglass figure that would make vintage pin-up models jealous. Simultaneously, his hips flared outward with a suddenness that nearly toppled him over, bones and flesh rearranging with alarming efficiency. Whoa, 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 Greg grabbed the edge of an old dresser to steady himself. How do people walk with these things? They're like built-in flotation devices. His stomach flattened, the six-pack he'd never quite achieved despite years of sporadic crunches vanishing in favor of a smooth, soft belly with just a hint of definition. He felt his center of gravity shift, forward, then back, then forward again, like a ship in a storm. The sensation was nauseating and exhilarating all at once. I'm going to fall on my face, he predicted glumly, trying to take a step. But his legs seemed to be growing, stretching, reshaping beneath him. His thighs thickened, gaining a curve that filled out his jeans in ways that would turn heads on any street corner. His calves slimmed and curved, creating shapely contours. His ankles, had he ever noticed ankles before, narrowed to delicate proportions. The strangest sensation yet came when his feet began to change. They shrank visibly, bones compressing and arching, toes wiggling and narrowing in shoes that were now laughably too big. His size 11 sneakers looked like clown shoes on feet that couldn't possibly be larger than a woman's 7. I'm going to trip and die, Greg declared to the empty attic. Death by magical gender swap, what a way to go. Greg gawked at her reflection. The person blinking back was drop-dead gorgeous, with features that wouldn't be out of place on a magazine cover. The transformation wasn't done yet, though. Greg watched, mesmerized, as his short, dishwater blonde hair began to change color at the roots, a rich chestnut brown spreading like spilled ink through each strand. The hair didn't just change color, it grew, lengthening at an impossible rate, cascading past his shoulders in soft waves that seemed to know exactly how to fall for maximum effect. Each strand twisted and curled of its own accord, creating a mane of glossy hair that framed her now heart-shaped face like a Renaissance painting. That's just showing off, Greg commented, unable to resist reaching up to touch the silky strands. Do you know how much women pay for hair like this? Greg watched as his lips, once thin and unremarkable, plumped into a perfect bow, parting in shock, then curling into an involuntary smile. They darkened slightly, taking on a natural pink hue that looked like expensive lipstick. Okay, she said, voice sultry smooth and completely unlike the baritone Greg had sported for 32 years. This is officially the weirdest Tuesday of my life. And that includes the time I found my college roommate brewing moonshine in our bathtub. The transformation wasn't quite finished with her yet. Greg looked down in alarm as his clothes began to shift and change, the fabric rippling like water. His comfortable jeans and t-shirt combo, the uniform of men who hate shopping, seemed to dissolve and reconstitute. The denim twisted, lightened, and suddenly split, rising up his legs, which were now unmistakably feminine. No, 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 Greg protested weakly. not a dress, anything but a... But it was too late. She watched in fascination as her clothes morphed completely, seams wriggling and threads reweaving into a floral sundress that fit like it had been tailored by a fairy godmother with a measuring tape accurate to the millimeter. The dress nipped in at the waist, flared out at the hips, and showed off a scandalous amount of newly acquired leg. "I look like I'm about to host a garden party," Greg, now definitely not Greg, muttered, plucking at the delicate fabric. "Or star in a yogurt commercial." She twirled, half in awe, half in horror, watching the dress flare out around her. The movement felt strangely natural, as if her body knew exactly how to move despite her brain's complete confusion. The transformation completed with a satisfying ping, like a microwave announcing that your gender swap was now fully cooked and ready to serve. "That's it," she asked the mirror, hands on her newly curved hips. No instruction manual, no dramatic music, not even a congratulations on your new body pamphlet. The mirror, ever unhelpful, merely reflected her startled, beautiful face. Greg tentatively poked her cheek. The skin was soft as velvet, smooth as porcelain, and slightly flushed with a healthy glow that no amount of expensive skincare could replicate. "Well, at least my complexion improved," she muttered, "though I doubt that was worth the price of my entire masculine identity." She ran her hands down her sides, marveling at the curves, the softness, the way her hands seemed to know how to move, even if her brain hadn't quite caught up. There was a disconnect between what she felt and what she knew. This body was foreign yet somehow familiar, like visiting a country you've only seen in dreams. "This is insane," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. "I'm a guy, a man, with man parts and man thoughts and..." She paused, realizing that certain anatomical features had definitely rearranged themselves during the transformation. Oh God, it was thorough, wasn't it? She took an experimental step forward, almost immediately wobbling on legs that seemed to have different operating instructions than the ones she'd used all her life. The hips swung with a natural sway, the dress swished pleasantly against her thighs, but her balance felt all wrong, like trying to ride a bicycle underwater. How do women do this every day? She glanced down at her bare feet, suddenly feeling oddly vulnerable without proper footwear. And why do I suddenly care about shoes? I've worn the same sneakers for 3 years. The compact, which had been lying open on the dusty dresser, snapped shut with a magical click that echoed through the attic like a gunshot. Greg yelped, jumping back, then yelped again at how high the sound came out. A flood of new instincts tumbled into her brain like a download completing: how to walk in heels without breaking an ankle, how to braid hair in 7 different styles, how to apply lipstick without looking like a clown who'd been punched in the mouth. Suddenly, she knew which perfume worked for a first date, something with vanilla notes, not too heavy, and which one said, "I really just want to watch Netflix and eat pizza." Anything in a body spray from the drugstore. It was like downloading a lifetime's worth of magazine tips in a single, sparkly moment. The knowledge settled into her brain alongside 32 years of male experiences, creating a bizarre mishmash of perspectives. "Fantastic," she sighed, blowing a strand of hair away from her face with practiced ease. "I go from Greg the guy to, what, Greta the glamorous, Georgia the gorgeous, Gabrielle the girl next door with D-cups." She peered at the compact suspiciously, afraid to touch it again. "If I open this again, do I turn into a poodle, or just get better at eyeliner? Maybe I'll grow another set of these," she gestured to her chest, "and really make an entrance at the family reunion." The attic door creaked open with perfect dramatic timing. Aunt Mabel peeked in, her silver hair piled in an elegant bun, wearing a flowing caftan that made her look like a retired fortune teller. She wasn't the least bit surprised by the vision of feminine beauty standing where her nephew had been just minutes before. "Oh, you found the compact. Lovely." Aunt Mabel smiled, as if discovering your nephew had turned into a bombshell brunette was perfectly ordinary. "Tea's downstairs, dear. Earl Grey with lemon, your favorite." She paused, eyeing Greta's unsteady stance. "Try not to trip over your own feet. It takes a while to get used to hips. They're wonderful for childbearing, terrible for walking through narrow doorways." Greta blinked, mouth falling open in a perfect O of surprise. "You knew this would happen, and you just left this thing lying around? What kind of aunt does that?" "The interesting kind, darling," Aunt Mabel winked. Would you rather I be the kind who knits doilies and talks about her gallbladder? But Greta gestured wildly at her transformed body. I'm a woman now. Doesn't that concern you even slightly? Aunt Mabel shrugged, the picture of nonchalance. It's a family heirloom. These things happen in our family. Your Uncle Harold spent a week as a redhead back in '86. He didn't hate it. Said it gave him insight into why they're always so angry, something about sunburns and freckles. A redhead, that's what you're comparing this to? Hair color? Greta's voice rose to a pitch that could probably shatter the dusty window panes. I have breasts, Aunt Mabel, and other lady parts. This isn't a dye job gone wrong. Details, details, Aunt Mabel waved a dismissive hand. The compact shows you perspectives you need to see. Sometimes that's a hair color, sometimes it's a gender. One time your great-aunt Ethel turned into a particularly handsome setter dog, made her much more sympathetic to the squirrels in her garden afterward. How long does it last? Greta demanded, trying to cross her arms over her chest and finding the position awkward with her new anatomy. Oh, that depends entirely on what you need to learn, Aunt Mabel said cryptically. Could be hours, could be weeks. Your second cousin Marcus was a lovely young woman for nearly 6 months. Found himself a husband and everything. Awkward at Thanksgiving when he changed back, but they worked it out eventually. 6 months, Greta squeaked. I can't be a woman for 6 months. I have a job, I have a life. I have a date with Sarah from accounting on Friday. Well, you still can, Aunt Mabel pointed out reasonably. Though you might need to explain a few things to Sarah first, or not, might make for an interesting evening. Greta, who honestly was starting to enjoy the view despite herself, sighed deeply, shoulders slumping in feminine defeat. Well, at least I didn't have plans tonight. Or, pants that fit. That's the spirit, Aunt Mabel beamed. And look on the bright side, women's clothing has pockets now, sometimes, occasionally, well, more than in my day anyway. Greta glanced at her reflection once more, taking in the complete picture. The woman in the mirror was undeniably beautiful, but more importantly, she looked confident, like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. There was something freeing in that, despite the circumstances. A slow, mischievous grin spread across her face, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass. You know what? I've always wondered how the other half lives, and I did need a new perspective. She tossed her luxurious hair with newfound flair. Plus, I bet I can get free drinks at every bar in town looking like this. That's my girl, Aunt Mabel chuckled. There's a closet full of clothes in the spare room. Your cousin Lizzie left them last summer. She was going through her everything must be pink and sparkly phase. Should fit you perfectly. Pink and sparkly, Greta repeated, eyeing her floral sundress. Because this isn't feminine enough. Trust me, dear, that's barely a starter kit for womanhood. Wait until you discover the joy of trying to match your bra to your underwear, while also ensuring both are invisible under white clothing. Maybe I'll try on those heels after all, Greta mused, looking down at her dainty feet. When in Rome. That's the spirit, though you might want to practice on carpeted areas first. Hardwood floors and novice heel wearers are a trip to the emergency room waiting to happen. And with that, Greta sashayed toward the attic door with newfound determination, new hips swaying with each step, ready to face a world that was suddenly a whole lot more interesting, and considerably more filled with properly fitting undergarments. Coming, Aunt Mabel, she called, her new voice melodic and confident. I have a feeling this is going to be one hell of a tea party.